Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Chicks and Sticks, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. My name is Melissa Boyd, and I'm once again joined by my partners in crime, Kristy Flannery, Hannah Garfield, and Mariah Holland. Hi, ladies. How are you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So if you're enjoying our show, make sure to drop us a like, a follow, or a comment from wherever you're watching or listening, and send us in any questions or comments, and we'll be sure to answer them in a future episode. We've been getting a few lately, so we appreciate that, and thanks for your continued support. Well, the off season is in full swing, so we wanted to discuss all the big news that has already happened this week around the NHL, and we'll start with the first big news that dropped on Monday, which was the Duncan Keith trade to the Edmonton Oilers. So the Blackhawks traded one of their franchise legends and a prospect, Tim Soderlund, to Edmonton in exchange for defenseman Caleb Jones and a 2022 conditional third-round pick. And the key to this trade probably is that Chicago didn't have to retain any salary. So Keith's full $5.5 million cap hit now belongs to the Oilers. So I wanted to ask you girls, well, first of all, thoughts on this trade for both teams. We'll start with Christy.
Okay. I wasn't expecting to go first. I think it's good. I think it's good for both teams. I mean, I think Chicago needs to get younger, and this is one way to do it. Caleb Jones might not be the flashiest name out there, but, you know, he's going to be given, I think, a little bit more of an important role in Chicago while they're trying to figure everything out. And for Duncan Keith going into Edmonton, I mean, it gives Edmonton more experience. I didn't realize that they already had 2 Stanley Cup winners on their roster, but neither of them are on the blue line. So I think, you know, Duncan Keith is really going to be great for them. And I think he had 15 points this season, Duncan Keith. 6 of them were on the power play. And I know Edmonton already had the number 1 power play, but it's not going to hurt to have him additionally on there with Draisaitl and McDavid.
Mariah, what do you think?
Kristy took all of my thoughts.
I mean, the pro of going first.
I mean, I think it's a good thing. I mean, Keith has obviously been with Chicago a long time, and maybe, I mean, not that he's struggled at all, but maybe it'll be a good thing that he can have kind of a change of scenery. And I think it was mentioned that he's also closer to his son. So that can help maybe motivate him to be, you know, take another step up in his game as well. As far as Jones, I don't know a lot about him, but I mean, like you said, the Blackhawks are trying to get younger, and who knows with what Taze is going through. And I mean, Kane is still at the top of his game, but he's getting older too. So it wouldn't hurt to go younger with some players that they can develop and keep going with.
Hannah, what about you?
I am not as high on this trade for Edmonton. I think we talked last week about how Edmonton kind of needs help everywhere. And obviously Duncan Keith isn't a hindrance. He is arguably one of the best players and one of the best defensemen of all time, but he's not playing at that level. He's not at that level anymore. He's 30. I didn't realize he's 37 and he has 2 more years of making $5.5 million. And that is a fair amount of change. That's a fair amount of money when you're the Oilers, who are already committing a lot of money to Draisaitl and McDavid. And also Nugent Hopkins also just got a new deal. Darnell Nurse is making a fair amount. And you already know that you need more pieces. They now only have $11 million in cap space. And they still are going to probably need another defenseman, especially if Adam Larson's a UFA this year. They're going to need a goaltender because Mike Smith is 39 and also a UFA this year. So right now their goaltenders are Mikko Koskinen and Alex Stalock, and no offense to either of them, but you need a bigger name in net to they need somebody else there. So while I think Duncan Keith is a phenomenal player, and I think he's going to be a great mentor to the young guys on Edmonton's blue line, like Darnell Nurse, like Ethan Bear, like Evan Bouchard. I think that getting all $5.5 million of his salary cap hit, don't think that's going to be a great thing for them in the long run when they need another wing, they need a goaltender, and they probably need another defenseman, and they only have $11 million of cap space now.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. I think Chicago is smiling right now, being able to unload that cap hit from their books for sure. And I think, and like you said, Hannah, I think it just limits their flexibility as to what they can do the rest of the way unless they somehow move out some contracts. But one thing I did read was that I think there was a lot of pushback from the Edmonton Oilers players who really wanted Keith in the fold. So I can understand that. One of them being, of course, Conor McDavid. So yes, Ken Holland has been heavily criticized this week for this move, and with reason. But I think at the end of the day, this was being pushed for from internally. So, and I do think he'll be, notwithstanding the cap obviously hit, I think he will be a nice fit there. And I think he's going to help them a lot. And I hope that it means that he'll be able to revive his career a little bit, because last season was a bit difficult for him. So, but yeah, as you said, it's a lot of money. So follow-up question on this is, do you think this now, so now Caleb Jones is in Chicago, a young up-and-coming defenseman whose brother Seth is also on the market right now. He's one of the biggest names out there available. Do you think this opens up the door to a Seth and Caleb Jones reunion in Chicago? I'll start with Mariah for this one.
Kristy's just waiting. She can't wait for this one. I haven't followed the Joneses story as much. I've heard Seth's name a lot, but unfortunately I haven't really done a lot of research on it. I would say probably yes, just because family teams like to have family together. It seems to have them play better. I mean, the Sedin twins were together for how long? They refused to split them up. And if Chicago has the space, I could see it happening if that's where he wants to be. So, I mean, I could see it happening.
Hannah, what about you?
I could see Seth Jones wanting to go there. I think when we were talking beforehand, Chicago is probably on his short list. My more concern is, does Chicago have the money to afford Seth Jones? I was looking at all these teams' cap hits earlier, and they only have $10 million of cap space left, even after offloading Keith's contract. If Seth Jones is, going to be looking for somewhere, are we assuming somewhere in the $8 to $10 million range? I mean, that's all your cap space, which if you're a team who is one Seth Jones away from winning a Stanley Cup, that's great. Of course you got to go in. Seth Jones is incredible. Who wouldn't want him on the team? But for a team like Chicago, like we kind of talked about with the Blackhawks banter girls 2 weeks ago now, they're not just one Seth Jones away from winning a Stanley Cup. They need help everywhere. And if you're giving all your cap space to just one player, that's not going to necessarily benefit your team in the long run.
I was going to say you probably should be a guest on Blackhawks Banter, because this is exactly sort of the line they've been taking, is that yes, it's great, to have Seth Jones, but we're not him away from being a contender, so it might not be worth it right now. But so yeah, you should be a guest on their show.
I suppose so.
Christy, will close this off with you.
It doesn't hurt to have Caleb on the team if you want to use him as almost bait to try and get Seth. I think the Devils did something similar when Scott Niedermayer was at the end of his career. They signed Rob Niedermayer just so that they thought it was enough appeal for Scott to come back. He obviously didn't. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't a dumb move, because like I said, even if Seth doesn't go there, you're still getting a 24-year-old defenseman that can develop with the team. But again, I think financially, I don't know if Seth really makes sense for a team that the way that Chicago is right now, and kind of, in the rebuild that they're in. I don't know if it makes sense financially for them to take on Seth.
Agreed.
because Seth is going to want, I'm thinking, a long-term deal. And you have to think, you don't know what's going to happen with Taze come October. And Patrick Kane's not 25. So you have to think about the future of the club.
Yeah, agreed. And as I was mentioning before we started recording, I'm not sure that Chicago has the assets to make a package to offer Columbus. I mean, they do, but they don't want to give it up. So, I'm certain that the ask would start with Kirby Dach because Columbus is desperate for centers. And I can tell you right now that that's not, like, Chicago's not giving up Kirby Dach for Seth Jones. So, yeah, I don't know where it goes from there. I'm not sure that there's a fit there, other than the fact that Caleb now plays for them. So the second big news this week, there's been a lot, but the second one that we wanted to touch on was, of course, the sort of shocking news out of Minnesota is that Bill Guerin has decided to buy out both Zach Parise and Ryan Suter, sorry, the final years of their contracts, which, yes, is going to save them approximately $10 million on their cap this season, but over the next 3, it's pretty awful what they're going to be, the dead cap that they're going to have. So this was I think a lot of people were expecting Zach Parise was going to be bought out. I don't think that was so surprising, but Ryan Suter definitely threw people a bit for a loop here. So I wanted to get your opinions on this sort of franchise-altering decision that they made this week. Hannah, we'll start with you.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So I was definitely surprised by this. I'm sure Mariah has a lot more to say as a Minnesota fan.
Yes.
But I think last week we were touching upon bad contracts a little bit, and Kristy made a good point when she was saying that it's never it's not the players' fault for teams giving them these contracts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what was Minnesota thinking, devoting 13 years to these guys who are now they're both 36 right now. Like you can do math when you offer a deal. So yes, the buyout makes sense. I feel bad for Ryan Suter and Zach Parise because, again, this isn't their fault. It's the team's fault for not having foresight or being able to do addition.
Kristy, what do you think about Zach? One of your faves.
One
Zach
of my favorites.
Being an unrestricted free agent as of right now.
I feel bad for Zach. I think he handled himself very, very well. So I do give him credit there because, I mean, if anyone wanted to go home to play hockey, even more than John Tavares, like, it was Zach Parise. But at the same time, it's a business. And you have to look at it from a business standpoint. He was making over $7 million and he was either a healthy scratch or he was playing on the fourth line. You can't pay that kind of money to a fourth line player. And it can be argued that he could maybe be a third line player, but it's still a bottom 6. So at that point, I think, from a business standpoint, it had to happen. From a fan standpoint, it's kind of sad to see happen. And as far as Ryan Suter goes, that's definitely the most surprising one that happened. I get it. Like, again, it's not the player's fault that you offered them this contract, but in the last 2 years, the Wild GM got rid of Zucker, Eric Stahl, Dubnyk, Koivu. Like, he's getting rid of anyone who's like 29 and older. So you can tell what the trend is in Minnesota. Like, he's going younger. And unfortunately, Zach and Ryan were kind of in the way. And on top of that, you're spending, this is my last point, and then I'm done. The other point is that in the Zach Ryan era, and Mariah, you could tell me if I'm incorrect, I think they only won 2 playoff rounds. You're spending a lot of money. I mean, that's basically like, if Edmonton wants to like look into the future, this could potentially be their future, spending so much money on 2 players, and you can only get through the first round twice. So it had to be done.
Well, Mariah, we'll give you the last word on this because you are close to the Wild. You do follow this team very closely, so you probably have the most insight to provide on this decision.
I'll try to keep it short, but I don't know how well I'll do that. Honestly, like Kristy just said, I'll bring up that point first. The playoffs, everyone was pointing out, like, I read Russo's article first because he's like pretty athletic. He's super close to the team, and they generally, I think, go to him first for interviews and stuff. They brought up that they made the playoffs the last 8 out of 9 seasons, but they don't have a cup. Like, it's great to get into the playoffs, don't get me wrong. I'm excited that we can make the playoffs, but the whole point is to get to the final round and eventually win it. And unfortunately, Zach and Ryan didn't do that. And when I heard the news, I didn't know what to say, because I wasn't shocked, but I also was. As far as Parise, like everyone said, yeah, I was surprised they bought him out. I thought maybe they'd try to do, like, have him waive his no movement clause maybe and see what would happen. But as far as Suter, that was a complete shock, because he didn't have the season he's had this past year. But I mean, with everything going on with it being shortened, and it's not surprising. But he was still a good defenseman and a leader on the defense. I mean, we still have Spurgeon and Brodin, but Suter was the glue that kind of held it together, in my opinion. I think they'll do okay without him, but it's going to be a transition. Yeah. That was the biggest shock. And as far as I know, Suter wasn't pleased. And like Christy, you said, Zach was very, he's Zach.
Typical Zach.
Yeah. He's composed, kind of just didn't show if it affected him at all. Yeah. And it is a bummer, because he's from here, his dad was around, well, with the North Stars and everything. But as you said, it's a business, and they have to move forward. They can't carry, yes, they're going to end up carrying the contracts anyway, but they needed the players now. And with moving those two, they have some room to sign the younger ones. And yeah, I mean, being 36, you could still be playing at the level of, I can't really think of anyone that's at that level. Maybe Chara, I guess. But in all honesty, their careers are going down. So the Wild had to do something. And you brought up another point, Christy, that Guerin has been cleaning house of all the older ones, and you can't blame him. I mean, the Wild have been one of the older teams for a long time. Like, even when they started, they started as an expansion team, so they had all older players too. And they never really moved away from that, even though they had Gabrick. They'd have these one or two players, but then those players would leave, and they would be stuck with the older veterans. Nothing against that, but it was time to move on.
It's not a winning organization right now, so he needs to do something to turn that around.
Yeah.
And the contracts can be blamed on Fletcher. Sorry, Mel.
No. Sorry, I didn't let you finish there. Yeah, well, that's it. It wasn't, Guerin didn't sign those contracts.
No, and I guarantee he probably wouldn't have. I mean, with the way he's been, like, he flat out said in the article they interviewed him, he's been a player. I'm pretty sure he's won a cup before, if I remember correctly.
Yes, with Pittsburgh, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, he knows what he's doing. So it's like, I'm willing to trust him on this and see because the last two, Fletcher did all right. Fenton, I wasn't a fan of, but see where he goes with it. If it doesn't work, well, it doesn't work. But at least we tried something. Yeah, I agree. At least, at least you see that he has a plan. Like they're moving into sort of a reset on the fly kind of thing, for sure. So you have to stay committed to that way of doing things, for sure. So now that they're both unrestricted free agents, where do you see them fitting in? I know that Parise, obviously, everyone just assumes that he's going to the Islanders, because the Islanders did try to acquire him last season, I believe. So that's kind of like the main assumption. But Suter, Ryan, consider it. Suter has a lot of suitors apparently already. So where do you see them potentially going? Christy, we'll start with you.
The reason the Islanders make sense to me is Lou Lamoriello. That's like the biggest thing why it makes sense. I think he would take Zach back in a heartbeat if he can make it financially work. And I think too, it would be such a great story because when it was his draft year, he wanted to play for the Islanders because before his dad played for the Minnesota North Stars, his dad was on the Islanders, and that's where he wanted. He was really shocked when the Islanders passed him up. I think it would be so fitting that he goes to the Islands and then the Islanders win a cup. And like, that's where he wins his cup at the end of the career. Like, I think that is like the Disney story that we're going to hopefully see next season. So that makes sense to me. I thought for a hot minute, Colorado, because I feel like Colorado might need a depth piece. I don't think that Saad's going to be back. We don't know what's going on with Landeskog. And if he doesn't sign, that's a lot of money that's going to be, not being used. It wouldn't be a need for Colorado, but it was just a name that kind of popped up to me. It might be a ridiculous pick, but yeah, I went for it. And then for Suter, I saw people saying that both Zach and Ryan were going to go to the Islanders. And I'm like, eventually they can't be a package deal. Like, there has to be an expiration date for this package deal nonsense. But I thought maybe the Canadiens. I know the Bruins need help on the back end, so I thought maybe the Bruins. And then my other thought was the Panthers because Keith Yandel was just bought out. So those were my picks for him. I don't know if any of them are good, but that was my thought.
Good ones.
I had similar thoughts. I also wrote Island. I also thought the Islanders would be a good fit for one or two of them, just because I do think they are, that one or two piece away from being a real contender. And those are two options that could be cheap. Islanders don't have a ton of cap space, but assuming they might be able to get them for, like 2 to 3.
Yeah.
One of them you could do fine. I don't like the Bruins for Suter.
No, okay.
I know I've seen it tossed around and I've seen both sides of opinions. And I do think that the Bruins, they need some older guy on defense because they're a very young blue line right now. And I think we saw how well that went this past season with that having such a young blue line. But I think I'd rather see Keith Yandel come up to Boston.
Oh, okay.
He's local guy. He's a little younger. He's 34. I think he would be a good fit. Or, if Charleston wants to play, sign him at the league minimum and bring him back because he doesn't belong in a Capitals jersey. But I also thought Parise might fit in Colorado just because they.
Okay.
We were on the same wavelength.
I don't feel stupid anymore. This is great.
No, I think Parise works, especially when, as we've kind of talked about him before on the show, like he's a guy made for the playoffs. Yeah. And Colorado does so great in the regular season, but then kind of flutters out in the playoffs, and depth scoring becomes a big issue for them. And so if you have a guy like Parise who is made for that playoffs, it would be a good fit, I think.
Mariah, what about you?
I'm honestly still in shock that I haven't really had a chance to even think about where they would go. I honestly, in the back of my mind, Parise, I could see going to the Islanders with all of what Christy, you had said with Lamoriello and all of that. I mean, that he is big on the nostalgia and where his dad played. That's why he was so excited with Minnesota when we did the retro jerseys and everything. He wore his dad's gloves in the warm-ups, and he's super into that, so I could see him doing that. The only thing I could see being a problem is being away from his kids. Unless they uproot them and move, I don't really see. It's like I'm not part of an NHL family, so I don't know how that works, obviously. Like, do you uproot your kids or do you come back and forth?
I know that I think for Green and Zajac, I think their family stayed in New Jersey and they kind of just went back and forth. And with Zach being familiar with New Jersey and having Green and Zajac's families here, I feel like it wouldn't be as difficult of a transition as, let's say, like a Colorado. I think it would be tough, but I don't think it's impossible.
Agreed.
Because, I mean, that would be his only thing. Because his kids are like 10 and under, I think. I'm not sure how old they are.
They might be younger than that.
Yeah, I think they are. But, I mean, he's been playing the whole time since they've been born. Yeah, it's been Minnesota. So, and I keep referencing the Athletic article, but he said that one of the hardest things was telling his kid that he can't play for the Wild anymore. And they're like, they don't want you anymore. He's like, no, they don't. I'm like, They do, but they can't afford your contract.
Yeah.
And that's part in the back of my head. I really wish they would re-sign them at like a really low amount because I don't want to lose them. But I know that's not gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for Parise, both of the like Suter, I could see Mel going to Montreal, even if Weber is hurt, just because they were like this in Nashville. And I mean, otherwise, I'm probably going to hear about it from the Blackhawks banter. And I don't know how much cap space they have, but I could see Parise or Suter going there because they need veterans. And I mean, it's closer to home. If Chicago is willing to do that, I don't know if they would be, but that I could kind of see that. Otherwise, I have no idea where they're going to end up.
Yeah, Chicago was my my thought as well for Suter. I think Parise is going to the Islanders. I mean, I think that's pretty much a foregone conclusion. I would think. I don't think Suter will come to Montreal. The word is that he's not a fan of moving north of the border. So I don't think Canada would be an option for him, although you never know. But yeah. But yes, he would be a good fit in Montreal, I think, if he did want to do that.
Can we agree that they're both going to go to some kind of contender? Like they're not signing with like a Devils or like a Rangers.
Yeah.
Like they're going somewhere for their last 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah. So maybe Chicago is a bit far-fetched for both. But yeah, I still think the fit would be good, but we'll see.
They should want to go to a contender.
Yeah.
I mean, there are two guys who have really, been great players in this league, but have kind of flown under the radar because they've been on, sorry, Mariah, but they've kind of been on underperforming teams. Yeah. So it would be good for them to kind of go. I think they should go to a contender. It's what they deserve.
Yeah.
They were expected to get this team. That it wasn't a fair expectation because they needed players around them, not them. They're not the type of players like Crosby. I mean, in all respect, they are great players, but they're not the type that can carry a team alone. They do well with other players around them.
Right.
The expectation with them was the same as McDavid for Edmonton. Like you're the franchise player, you're going to bring home a cup. Yeah. And you really forgot about the support that player needs to do that.
They're Taylor Hall, they're really great players and they're not McDavid, they're not Crosby, they're not the guys who will pull a team on their back to the Stanley Cup finals.
I agree.
Which isn't a bad thing. Not everybody can be that type of player.
Yeah.
I had heard rumored, I don't know which player it was. I think it might have been Parise, but Vegas possibly too.
I could see Vegas too.
Vegas is in on everybody. So just
sure.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone wants to be on Vegas.
Yeah. So the last obviously topic we wanted to cover is of course the first major event of the off season, which is coming up. Well, we're recording on Thursday night, so it will be in 6 days, less than a week. The Seattle Kraken expansion draft. It feels like we've been talking about this forever, and it's finally here. Well, pretty close. So we wanted to talk about what each of our teams that we cover at the Hockey Writers, what the team's protection lists will probably look, what we anticipate the protection list will look like, and who could be susceptible to be selected by the Kraken next Wednesday. So we'll start with, I can't remember where I am, so I'm just going to pick somebody. We'll start with Hannah and the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins actually made a big signing. So extending Brendan Carlo. He was an RFA, I believe. So how does that impact the protection list, if at all? And I think actually, Hannah, you wrote an article. Did I see that? Yes, I did. I think about Boston's protection list. So tell us about it.
So I'm gonna kind of reiterate kind of the thoughts I made in that article, where the Boston Bruins, it's really it's kind of boring because there's no real big decisions that need to be made. Their protection list, it has to include Bergeron and Coyle because they have and Marchand because they have no move clauses, but why would you not protect them, even if Coyle had kind of a down year? And then they're obviously also going to protect Pastrnak and they're going to protect Smith. So those are kind of your 5 out of your 7 forwards. And there's kind of 4 guys who could kind of take the 2 other spots. I personally think it should go to Frederick and DeBrusk over Lazar and Ritchie. Frederick has really become, he's still young. He's only like 23, 24. And I'm a big Trent Frederick fan, and I really think that we've only seen a little bit of what he can be in this league. He's just been kind of a nuisance player, but I think he could be kind of a Brad Marchand type where, starts out in that kind of nuisance 4th line role and then can kind of elevate his game to a higher level, maybe not the same level as Brad Marchand, but I really think there's potential with this guy, and he's become such a kind of a cult favorite around Boston. Because I feel like in the games that he does play, he always does something really interesting or something really chaotic, and Boston loves their chaotic athletes. So I think, and then DeBrusk, I feel like for Boston, we've talked about Jake DeBrusk so much this past year because it was a very disappointing season for him, and I don't think anyone would deny that. But he's still a 1st-round pick. And he still had 27 goals only 2 years ago. So, and he's only 24. So you can't expose a guy like him. So those kind of is why I think those 7 are going to be your forwards that they protect. And then for a defenseman, it's going to be Carlo, McAvoy, and Grzelcyk. But all 3 just makes sense. They're your top 3 defensemen. I think Brandon Carlo could be a future captain for the Bruins. So I love the 6-year extension. I wrote a previous article predicting kind of what I thought his extension would be. And I was thinking maybe more in the 4 to 5 years. So, but I think 6 is good for a guy like him. And then I wish you didn't have to protect a goaltender. I really wish so the Bruins would probably protect Dan Vladar. But the Rask and Halak, their 2 main starters, are both UFAs, so they don't have to protect either of them. And then Swayman's still on his ELC, so again, he's not eligible. So it's almost like, I mean, Vladar is good, but like I wish we could use that to protect 1 more defenseman instead. I think ultimately Jeremy Lauzon will be the player that gets picked, which it's not a huge loss. I mean, it's still a loss. He's a decent young defenseman, but at the end of the day, I think any of the players left exposed, there would be decent pickups for Seattle, but nobody left exposed is really going to make or break the Bruins next season. So at the end of the day, I don't think the expansion draft is that big of a deal for the Bruins. They're going to lose a decent piece, but not a phenomenal piece. And I really think the big thing for Bruins is to avoid any sort of deals with Seattle to try to protect any of the players left exposed. Like, just let them pick who they want and move on. Sorry, I think I just rambled there for a while.
That's okay. No. Well, it's complicated because the rules are very complex for this draft. I'm not sure how the teams keep track of what they have to expose, not expose, what they have to protect. It's confusing even like to me. So no problem. Christy, how about the Nashville Predators? So the latest is that it sounds like Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson will be left unprotected, which is pretty major. But enlighten us on what's happening in Nashville.
So last time for Vegas, they went with 8 skaters and 1 goalie. I think they're going to do that again. I think they have to protect Roman Josi, which is a given. He already stated that he is not losing Matthias Ekholm to the expansion draft, which I agree. I mean, he's a valuable piece. That's your trade piece. If you're going to lose him, you get something in return. You don't just leave him out, on his own. You're going to save Ellis, and then My controversial pick is that I would save Carrier and Fabro as your two young defensemen. One's 23, one's 24. I would not leave them to Seattle. Defensemen take a long time to develop in the NHL. You want to keep them. You want them to keep developing because Yossi, Ellis, and Ekholm are all basically the same age. So your blue line, as good as it is going to age the exact same time. So you need to have somebody in the wings. So I would not give up a young defenseman. And as far as the forwards, I would say Forsberg, Cunnin, and Yarncroc, which I can never say his name correctly. So I apologize for butchering that. And then obviously you're saving Saros. You're protecting Saros.
I knew who you meant, so don't worry.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like, I think I butchered one or two. So my bad.
And who do you think is most susceptible to be selected?
Ryan Johansson.
Gotcha.
I think put with the right players, he could be a number one center. It's just, they need to get rid of some contracts. Those two are really on contracts that, again, really aren't that great.
Well, and I believe he only has 1 year left, right, before he hits you. So that's a low risk for Seattle, and could have high impact, obviously, high skill.
Yeah.
In the,
you don't know what a change of scenery can do. Sorry, I didn't talk over you, but
no, it's a good. No, go ahead. I'm the one who's over. So Mariah, the Wild. So now that Minnesota doesn't have to protect Suter and Parise, how does that impact their list?
It's a good thing. Because I was looking over the list. I go to Cap Friendly, I'm sure all of us do.
Yeah.
Trying to look at the lists and make sense of all the rules and everything. And I'm glad they highlight the ones that are eligible. So I'm like, the rules just contracts confuse me in general. I need to get better at that, and I'm trying, but they change the rules constantly. Honestly, it makes it easier for them. They're going to protect, I think Nico Sturm is who they said, which they should. He's a valuable up and coming guy. He got overshadowed a lot. I actually am working on this in my current article I'm working on, that he was overshadowed by Kaprizov. No one really noticed him except maybe Wild fans. He did have a decent season, but I mean, Kaprizov was the one everyone was paying attention to. So Sturm, they should definitely keep as another up and coming forward. And I think they said Dumba is probably the other one they're going to protect.
Yes.
And I'll admit it, I hated that idea. But when I think about it, he is a player. If they were to trade, they want something for him. They don't want to get nothing, because he's a $6 million contract that, they could get another decent defenseman for. Not that he's not. He's just, I prefer. I mean, I don't know who Seattle's going to pick. I mean, it probably would take me seeing who they select from other teams to even figure it out. I just hope they don't take Kakinen, because that's someone they're saying is probably going to be exposed. They're going to protect Talbot instead.
Okay.
I don't know how I feel about that. I would probably do the other way around, because I don't feel like goaltenders are so hard. I feel like I don't think Seattle would really want to I feel like they'd want maybe a different veteran goaltender than Talbot. Nothing against him, but someone that's maybe had consistent starting all the time, but I could be wrong. I just don't want to lose our up and coming decent goaltender, because Kakinen has proved he's ready to play. Talbot was doing better at the time and they didn't switch. So, I mean, it's interesting. I really don't know who they're going to select, honestly.
Well, it's interesting. I think a lot of people had them leaving Cam Talbot exposed. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, there's a decision to be made there for sure.
Yeah.
So from a Montreal Canadiens perspective, well, a lot has changed in the last 24 hours. There's never a dull moment in Montreal, and the off season has started, so you can imagine that it's pretty rock and roll already. Heading up until yesterday, Montreal's biggest decision was whether to use the 7-3-1 or the 8 skater route in order to protect their top four defensemen, Shea Weber, Jeff Petrie, Joel Edmondson, and Ben Sherratt. But that problem was apparently solved because unfortunately it looks like Shea Weber's going to be on long-term injured reserve and his career is in jeopardy. That was the big story that dropped last night. So it sounds like Montreal will leave him exposed, which will allow them to go the 7-3-1 route and protect their 3 defensemen that I mentioned before. And, pretty much all of their forwards. The interesting thing for the forwards will be whether they choose to expose Jonathan Drouin or not. Jonathan Drouin, who missed the last part of the season, he was on a leave of absence from the team. So it'll be interesting what they do in that situation. And the biggest, I think right now, the biggest concern for them, Hannah, you said you wish Boston didn't have to protect a goalie. Montreal wishes they could protect 2 because they will have to expose Jake Allen. And it's looking more and more like, because one of their top 4 defensemen will not be exposed, Shea Weber, but obviously he won't be selected, but it sort of means that Jake Allen will be probably the player chosen, and which would be a significant blow for the Canadians because he fits so well in his first year and was really a perfect backup for Carey Price. So it will be interesting to see if Marc Bergevin either makes a deal with Seattle to not take him. And I know everyone's kind of being like, don't do that deal. But I think in this situation, it is a good thing to do. And Bergevin has the draft picks and assets to do it. And it wouldn't hurt too much. Not as much as losing Jake Allen would. So we'll see. It's an interesting time for Bergevin. He has a lot on his plate right now. So we'll see what the protection list looks like. But for now, it's looking like Jake Allen will be the favorite to be chosen.
I think everybody's a little nervous about like making deals at the expansion draft after what happened in Vegas.
Yeah.
But definitely, I mean, in some cases, it's going to make sense to do it. But I feel like all fans are kind of hesitant after seeing how well Vegas did. Well,
and when I thought about it was basically because we were willing to take on Jake Allen's full salary last season, it's like 4 point something. They didn't really give up that much to get him, like hardly anything. So I'm like, I think it'd be worth giving up something now to keep him, because there is a fear that he's going to leave for nothing. So it'll be interesting what they do there. But that, So if I was the GM, I would make a deal for sure. But we'll see. So that wraps up. That's all the time we have for this week. So yeah, as I mentioned, off season is in full swing, starting with the expansion draft on Wednesday, and then the NHL entry draft on Friday and Saturday, and then of course then free agent frenzy starts a few days following that. So the next few weeks are going to be, in a word, insane. There's a reason we call it the silly season, because it really is. It seems like every 5 minutes something changes. So, but please be sure to, visit thehockeywriters.com, because we're going to be pumping out the content for the next few weeks. We'll be keeping you up to date on everything that's going on. Make sure to tune in to all of our weekly shows that we produce for YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. So we'll be the place to be for the next few weeks. And I have to mention that we have a NHL entry draft guide that is a really, really great resource. So if you're looking to catch up and learn about the prospects that your team may select next weekend, You have to check it out. Our team does an incredible job, so I have to get out there, and it's free. So I have to put that in there because I know the team has been putting a ton of work in there. So please do that. And last but not least, I have to plug Christy's Morning Skate newsletter. Please go to morningskate.io to subscribe and get your hockey fix delivered to your inbox every day, 5 days a week, I should say. And we'll see you next week. We'll continue our off-season conversations and debates, so should be fun. Enjoy the craziness, everyone, and we'll see you next week.